Welcome to another episode of Hire Navigate Your Job Search. I'm George Murray, your host. And each week we try to bring a topic for those who are struggling or actually new to job search and bring in a subject matter expert to be able to answer any questions and kind of go into what they've been able to develop in their careers to help people, whether it's just in job search or whether it's in life. Remind people that we encourage questions so that if you have a question, we'd really ask you to ask it because if you don't, I'm sure 10 other people wish they would have. We are streaming from LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. And then by Saturday afternoon, this will be edited and uploaded to all the podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So this episode, we're talking about the Go Giver Way with co-author Bob Berg. I'm really honored to be able to bring Bob on the show. I've read about Bob a couple of years ago and actually learned about the process well before I was actually handed the book by Steve Blexford, who's here in the Minneapolis area. This episode, so for 30 years, Bob Berg, and I'm reading the script. So from Bob Berg's years has been successful showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their business growth. Although for years he was best known for sales classic Endless Referrals, it is his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored by John David Mann, that has created a worldwide movement. While part of a 4-book series, The Go-Giver itself has sold more than 1 million copies. Just imagine that, just that one book of all the 4. And has been translated into 30 languages. It is rated 10 on the Inc. magazine list of most motivational books ever written and was a HubSpot's 20's most high-rated sales book of all times. So the people who are in transition, listen up. Here's an opportunity to go out and grab yourself a book. Bob is the founder of the Go Giver Successful Alliance, an online membership and community for successful entrepreneurs, leaders, sales professionals, and he publishes the very popular daily impact email, which I am a part of and get each and every morning. He is an advocate of supporter and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He is also an unapologetic animal fanatic and serves on the board of directors in the Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in his town of Jupiter, Florida. And then we also want to just welcome Bob to the show. So Bob, without further ado, I appreciate you coming on board. And why don't you tell a little bit more maybe about what really inspired you to kind of collaborate together with Mr. Mann on this particular effort and movement?
Well, thank you for having me, George. Pleasure to be with you. And really, John and I came up with this as just really as a way of sharing some of the experiences we've had and the studies we've done and people we've gotten to speak with regarding principles of success. I mean, there's really nothing new in the book, right? I mean, these are all principles that successful people have used for as long as there have been market economies. I would imagine some people did so unknowingly, just intuitively, and other people learned these things. We may have given the principles different names and did it in a story form, thanks to the magnificent writing of John. But really, it's just the things that we can do in order to create the environment for the success of those around us, as well as our own.
I want to just share with folks, when I was in my first job transition back in 2016, I'll never forget Greg Rye. Those who have been in Minneapolis, he's also another person that really gives as well as helps people in job transition. And he actually sat down and talked to me and he said, listen to this, George. He goes, learn earlier in my career or in your career than I did mine. He says, the more you give, the more you get. Mm-hmm. And he says, it's not immediately, but over a period of time. And I realized just in 7 years going forward, he was spot on. And then the second one is really Lenny Newman and Ann Pryor, but also Uber networkers here in the Minneapolis area. And Ann has been on our show earlier. They talk about tugs, takers, users, givers, and sharers. And they're like, if you're a giver and sharer, you will go farther on in your life than you are a taker and a user.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense too, and when you think of it, it really is very logical. It's not there's nothing woo woo about that. Oh, just give and good things will happen. It's not that at all. It's that when you're
Right.
that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire. When you can focus on helping others solve their challenges and problems, when you can move the focus off of yourself and onto moving others closer to happiness, people feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell the world about you. So yeah, and that's I often say when I speak to sales organizations, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money, or even just because you're a nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe that ultimately they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And I think that when people meet other people and they look at these new people they meet as people of increase, people who are going to add value to their lives, they are automatically more attracted to them. So what's important is that when you are that giving person, if you will, that sharing person, that if you will, that it comes from a place of authenticity, that you really feel as though it is you want to. I always say authenticity is it can be defined as being congruent with acting congruently with one's values. So when someone really wants to make a difference in the lives of others and they act accordingly, that's very, very powerful, and people get it and people respond to that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And when we're looking at it from somebody who's currently in transition or new to transition, it's first the meeting and the networking. It's not transactional. It's not a one and done, because again, people can feel that, hear that. But if you're genuinely interested in the person that you're networking with, even if you're not employed, you have a lot of resources and a lot of
Hmm.
connections. You
That's
can
right.
help the other individual, right? And it
Right.
reciprocates. And that's kind of where we go back to where Greg says, the more you give.
Yeah, it's interesting that after the Go Giver came out, we were contacted by a woman named Heather Battaglia who in St. Louis, and she was part of a group of people who were all in transition for jobs. They were all mid-level to upper level execs but they were all unemployed and they were looking. So they get together with each other, they'd brainstorm and so forth. But they were out looking for jobs for themselves. At a certain moment after reading The Go Giver, Heather had a great idea. She said, rather than just going out looking for ourselves, let's look out for each other. Let's do our best to refer each other. Let's look
I like
right.
that.
And all of a sudden, boom, 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 jobs started popping and they started. So, it's not that you're sacrificing yourself, not at all. It's just
Right.
that when your focus is on providing value to others and you come at it from that viewpoint, if you will, all of a sudden great things happen. Again, nothing magical or mystical about it. It makes perfect sense.
I agree. So, first question: a path that those in job search can choose a totally different path, like going on their own, which I've seen. People just get tired of the corporate world. You talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, but what about those who aren't entrepreneurs? Does the message in Go Giver still apply to them?
Yeah, because whether someone's an entrepreneur, which is someone who starts their own business, someone who invests their time, their money, their energy, someone who maybe has taken on other investors, but they basically an entrepreneur is someone who owns their own business and does. Um, and you know that you're going to survive and thrive in your business based on how you're able to serve your end users, your customers and clients. Well, with someone who works, who's not necessarily an entrepreneur, but works within another company, another organization, they maybe not be entrepreneurs, but they're still intrapreneurs. They
Yeah.
still need to be entrepreneurs within another person's organization. Remember a few minutes ago when I said, as a salesperson, we could also say as an entrepreneur, no one's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Well, as an intrapreneur, as an employee, nobody's going to hire you and continue to pay you because you have a mortgage payment to meet, or because you want to send your kid to a certain school, or because you want to whatever. They're gonna hire you and keep paying you because they believe you're adding sufficient value to their enterprise to make it worthwhile for them to do so. So as that entrepreneur, your goal, your main job is still to provide value to your end users. Now, that may not be the end customer, depending upon what you do. It may be your supervisor. It may be the team that you're leading. It may be the person in that other silo who it typically is not very forthcoming and helpful with information, but because of your people skills and your ability to work with others, you're able to help, have them help, and you're able to help them, and you're able to benefit the organization, and maybe that gets noticed, right, by others. So whoever you're serving, your goal, your aim is to still provide much more in value than what it's costing others to keep you on.
And I love the keyword serving. And it's ironic that the last probably 4 or 5 years, a lot of companies are looking for servant leaders, right? They
Mhm.
don't
Yeah,
realize that what is new is really old, because that's
right.
the oldest type of leadership on the planet. Um, Shifting gears a little bit, can you give us a quick review of the 5 laws you and John shared in the book? And I believe I actually have it that we can show our viewers on live, but the people that are going to be listening on the podcast will have to pay special attention as you walk through them.
Yeah, so the 5 laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value is all about providing such an amazing experience with you, that over and above the product or service, that this person feels so good about themselves, about the situation, about you at every touch point, that by the time the transaction is completed, whether it is they're buying your product or service, or offering you a job, they feel that they're receiving much more in benefit than what they're paying. And again, this goes much beyond just the intrinsic value of what you provide. It all comes back to the experience that you're giving them. Um, the law of compensation takes it a step further. It says that that the value you provide is very important, but to scale this, you also need to impact the lives of many people. The third law, the law of influence, it talks about your influence uh, uh, being determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, I want to just qualify that, if I may, because when you first hear that, it sounds a little counterproductive, right? Maybe even Pollyanna-ish. Though when you think about it, the greatest leaders, top influencers, highest consistently money earning people, this is simply how they run their lives and conduct their business. They're always looking out for the other person. But it's important to understand that when we say place the other person's interests first, we certainly don't mean that you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply that, as Joe, the protege in the story, learned from several of the mentors, the golden rule of sales, the golden rule of business, we could say the golden rule of leadership, what have you, is that all things being equal, people will do business with, refer people, and be willing to follow those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to what we call an other focus. Looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win.
Like that.
Uh, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just comment. I do really like that.
Oh, thank you. Law number 4, the law of authenticity, which says that the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. Well, this really means, as Deborah, one of the mentors in the story, shared, that all the skills in the world, whether it's sales skills, technical skills, people skills, right, as important as they are, and they are all indeed very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you. They also feel comfortable with you. And just as importantly, they feel safe with you. And why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting. And it's a very important element of human nature that we as humans want to make sense of our world, right? In a world that often doesn't seem to make sense. We want consistency because then we feel, secure. We understand what is happening, what's likely to happen next. This is why, if you've ever known someone who was one way one day and the next time you saw them, they were absolutely totally different people. That's a horrible, feeling, right? That you don't know
Right.
which person's going to show up, right?
Yep.
So when you bring that consistency to the table, that predictability, that actually inspires trust.
And I love all the laws, but this law really kind of hits me because early on, when I started writing my first book, and I was talking and speaking about people, I said this maybe in a little different way. I just told people, I says, make sure you show up yourself, right?
Mhm.
Because everybody else is taken. That was my kind of thing, right? And
Right.
to your point, right? There are people that are maybe long in job search and then they kind of get desperate and they try to, maybe dumb down their skills or whatever. And they show up one person, but then day one, they show up as a different person. And they may be in job search, a year or so later. And the problem is that you didn't really show up in your authentic self, like you had stated.
You're right, and that's a challenge, that's an issue. Exactly. And law number 5, the law of receptivity, is all about understanding that, yeah, you breathe out, okay, but you also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts, as most people might think they are, and as the world around us tells us it is. We really live in a society that, in many ways, is very anti-prosperity, and those are the messages that we get from the world around us constantly. When the fact of the matter is, giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. This is universal law. These are laws of nature, whether economic nature, financial, human nature, physical nature. We plant before we harvest. That's just
Mhm.
nature. That's a law of nature. We sow before we reap. We give before we receive. So the giving needs to come first, and we then need to be able to receive. If you stop one, if you don't do one, you shut down the flow.
And then that's true in job search too. I tell people too that may have been what they consider long-term job search, whatever. I said, if you aren't planting seeds each and every day, and first of all, you can't expect a seed to germinate like a tree in the next day. And that's kind of the frustration because even though each day feels like a month, if they're
Mm,
not continually doing that and building that over a period of time,
yeah.
then it can dry up really quickly.
Exactly.
I appreciate you going over those 5 laws. I want to shift the question here to, when most of us are in job search, we're not only looking at cost, but the value we bring to a potential employer.
Mhm.
Let's go back to value though. How does a person add value to others without costing too much?
Well, so let's define value. Let's look at value. In fact, let's look at it as a regard in terms of cost or price. Okay, so
Mhm.
price or cost, financial cost is actually only one type of cost. There's there's lost opportunity costs, there's aggravation costs, all these things your potential employer they look at as costs, right? So,
Right.
but let's in this case look at the cost as being price, what they're going to pay to bring you on. Okay, so price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It simply is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, employee, what have you, that
Mhm.
brings so much worth or value to another human being that they will willingly exchange their money, in this case, for that value. So, in other words, as we alluded to earlier, if they're going to hire you, they need to believe that they are going to receive more in value than what they're paying. Now, if they're smart, if they're a smart employer, they're also going to give you more in value than what you're um, giving in terms of your time. They're going to create a situation for you where you can learn, where you can grow, where you can enjoy your work, where you can create relationships, where you can, you know what I'm saying? So we want
Sure.
both parties to feel very good about it. And we know there's, well, we don't know, but statistics say there's something like 75% of all the workers who work for big companies are disengaged in some way. And again,
Yep.
I don't know how, if that's totally true, but it wouldn't surprise me, just anecdotally. Okay.
It's
And
true.
yeah. And so, but in this case, since we're the ones going for the job, we're the ones, it behooves us to, the onus is on us to provide why we are of sufficient value to them for them to want to hire us. Okay. So
Mhm.
the first thing that we want to do is know enough about this company and itself to understand what they need. What would make us most valuable to them. um, we need to ask questions. I know they ask us questions, right? But we need to ask questions. We need to ask questions so that we can discover what this person who is doing the hiring, what they need, what they want, what they desire, what challenges they're having, maybe ones they don't know about that we can then help mitigate, or strengths they may have that they're not even aware of that we can help them leverage. Whatever it is, we need to be able to communicate that value that we bring to them over and above the intrinsic value of the job itself. In terms of how we add value without it costing much, well, there are, John and I talk about there being 5 elements of value, which are
Mhm.
ways we can bring value, and that is through excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation. And, so much of that, again, none of it has to do with the intrinsic value of the job other than maybe excellence, but it's all about the experience that we're providing.
No, I agree, and I like that. We probably only have about 4 minutes for another question or two. So if our viewers that are showing on live want a question, please chime in. But I'm going to ask, when we are in job search, we can all use a coach or mentor. Let's talk about mentorship. First, what's the best way to find a mentor? Perhaps most importantly, what should an up and coming not do when trying to find one?
That's a great question. I think, and finding a mentor certainly is just such a valuable thing because a good mentor can cut your learning curve by years. I think what happens, I think the biggest mistake people make when searching for a mentor, or not when searching, but when approaching a potential mentor, is just coming right out and saying, "Hey, I really need a mentor." Because again, that's about you, right? First of all,
Right.
it also maybe comes across a bit entitled, like because you need one, this person should give you one, and it's also asking someone to make a commitment to you before they even really know you. It's sort of like saying to somebody,
Yes.
"Hey, would you share with me 30 years of your life's experience, even though you don't know me from a hole in the wall?" Right? But you certainly can approach anyone, But the way you might ask could sound more like, I know you are extremely busy. And if you just don't have time to do this, or for whatever reason you'd rather not, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I might ask you one or two very specific questions. Now, when you approach that way, um, what you've done is really three things. One is you've separated yourself, you've distinguished yourself from others by communicating that you respect the process. It's not just something that you feel you're owed, but you realize it's a big ask and that this person's very busy and that right. Secondly, you've given this person an out or back door by leading with, if you just don't have time, or if it's something you'd simply rather not do, I'll absolutely understand. You've said to them, hey, there's no pressure. This is totally up to you. And this is again another element of human nature. People want autonomy. They don't want to feel
Yes.
boxed in, right? And they also, by you asking this way, you're basically communicating that you do respect their time, that you're not going to be a time waster for them. Because remember, if you want them as your mentor, so do a ton of other people. So they
Sure.
probably have limited time to be able to do these things. But third, perhaps most importantly, is the way you framed the ask. You didn't just say, can I pick your brain?
Oh
Everybody
yeah.
asks this person to pick their brain. It's
Yeah.
also very general, and again, says that a lot of time, instead, you're saying, may I ask you one or two very specific questions?
Mm,
Now, what you've communicated to this person is, okay, this person has an agenda, and a agenda in a good way here. They
right.
know what they want to ask. They're coming to me with something very specific. I can take a few minutes to do that for anyone, right?
Right.
And so now you're much more likely, again, there's no guarantee, but much more likely that they're going to say, sure, go ahead. What can I do for you? Or how can I help? Now, you want to make sure that you research them thoroughly so that you don't ask anything that you could have discovered the answer to online. But you
Right.
also want to make sure, you don't take up much of their time. You thank them profusely at the end and let them know how much you appreciate them and that you're going to apply their wisdom right away. Would it be all right if from time to time I check back with you and just gave you a progress report? They're going to say, oh, of course, please do. Right. And then, you want to write a handwritten, personalized thank you note, not a text, not an email, that just again says, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for so graciously sharing your time and wisdom. I look forward to applying it right away. We'll check back and let you know how things are progressing. Best regards, so and so. I would also may even, discover there, and you can do this online, find out what their favorite charitable cause is and just make a small donation. It doesn't have to be anything big, just a small donation, right?
Right.
In their name, and this will get back to them, and you're not kissing up or anything, but again, you're letting them know you're respecting the process and you want to add value to them in a
That's
way
awesome.
that
I
you
like
could,
that
right.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so then again, you might call them in a few weeks, or contact them some way, whatever, and maybe and it may be that you develop a mentor protege relationship with them over time, or maybe not. That might be the one time you speak with them, but now you know how to get conversations with lots of other people as well. And again, whether any of them develop into a true mentor protege relationship, well, you never know. You can't control that, but you can control the action that you're taking. And the way you're doing this is much more likely to have that result.
Well, Bob, it goes pretty fast, and I just want to turn around and close with I do have two of your books of the five now. The Go Giver Marriage, I think, is actually the newest one,
Yeah, well,
correct?
that's John
Oh, it
David
is.
Manns
Okay.
and his wife Anna.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And then the
and
Go Giver, which actually, as I told everybody, Steve Bletchford actually is the one that gave me. I think it's his stick. When
thank you,
he,
Steve.
when you first meet him, he basically it's the first book he gives everybody. Everybody knows that,
Wow,
right?
so
And
appreciate that.
so, yeah, great books.
Yeah,
How do
and by
people
the
get
way,
a hold of you?
I highly recommend John and Anna's book. Again, I was not involved with that one. That's theirs. They're a married
Yeah.
couple, and they just did a fantastic job with that, and it's gotten rave reviews. So
How do people get a hold of you?
I'm very easy to do so. Burg.com, BURG.com. And while there, they
Nice.
can subscribe to my daily impact email if they'd like.
Great. Well, Bob, again, I really appreciate your time thank you for writing the books to help guide us all into a better place.
George, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Take care. All right. Just want to tell people that, again, appreciate Bob coming on the show. It's really transformed my life in the last 7 years, really kind of putting me in much better situations by just using the approaches that Bob has put in his books. I also want to tell people, if you know anybody in job search and you believe that this show can help them, I ask that you comment, share, and like. And then 3 books is I always talk about when people are in job search specifically. And The Go Giver helps people in job search, but also helps people in life. The same thing with The NCG Factor, which is by Larry Kaufman, who was on our show a couple of weeks ago. And then, of course, Hired, who is Hired, Cut Your Career Search Time in Half, which is also the one that sponsors this LinkedIn Live and podcast. So I want to wish you all a great weekend. And if you need any help, you can always reach out.
Your mind will break.